I thought being thrown out of my own home with two crying children was the lowest point of my life. My husband believed he owned the empire, the accounts, and the future. But standing in that cold bank office, I remembered the worn metal card my mother slipped into my hand. I slid it across the mahogany desk. The manager's face went pale instantly. He finally realized that the man who kicked me out did not own a thing. My name is Harper Monroe. At 34 years old, I had mastered the art of becoming furniture in my own home. We lived in a sprawling estate in Ashford Ridge, Virginia, a place where the driveways were long enough to hide secrets and the hedges were high enough to bury shame. To the outside world, and specifically to the Weller family, I was nothing more than the background wife. I was the silent figure arranging flowers while the titans of industry spoke, the one who ensured the crystal was polished so they could see their own reflections more clearly. My husband, Grant Weller, stood in the center of the living room, holding court with a glass of scotch in his hand. He was the CEO of Weller and Company, a title he wore like a crown he had forged himself, rather than one he had simply inherited and frantically tried not to drop. "It is all about leadership," Grant boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "The market was volatile last quarter, absolutely brutal. But I steered us through. I built this empire's resilience with my own two hands. I sat in the corner, sipping water, listening to every word. I did not correct him. I did not point out that his hands had been shaking when the liquidity crisis hit 2 months ago. I did not mention that the only reason the suppliers had not walked away was because I had spent 3 nights renegotiating terms under a private consultancy, alias he did not know existed. He bragged about the empire he built, never realizing he was standing on a floor I was holding up with my bare shoulders. The bills that miraculously got paid, the loans that quietly disappeared, the vendors who suddenly decided to extend grace periods, none of that was luck. It was me. It was a complex web of accounts and trusts I had set up years ago, distinct legal entities that no one in the Weller house had access to. They saw the results and praised Grant's genius. I saw the ledger and knew the truth. Cordelia Weller, my mother-in-law, drifted toward me like a cold front. She was elegant in that sharp, dangerous way that wealthy women often are, wearing pearls that cost more than most people's education. "Harper, dear," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It is so lovely that you can just sit there and relax while Grant carries the weight of the world. I suppose not everyone is cut out for the stress of importance. You are so good at simply being present. I just want to support Grant." "Cordelia," I replied softly. "Of course you do." She patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "It is the best you can do." I let her walk away. The insults did not sting anymore because I knew their expiration date. My only soft spot, the only cracks in my armor, were upstairs sleeping. Emma was 8 years old, and Noah was 6. They were the reason I endured the condescension. I kept them far away from the toxic power games of the living room, creating a bubble where their father was a hero and their grandmother was just a nice lady who gave expensive gifts. I absorbed the poison so they would not have to drink it, but silence is not weakness. That was the mistake the Wellers made. They confused my lack of noise for a lack of ammunition. I was not quiet because I was submissive. I was quiet because I was waiting. I was a strategist watching the enemy map out their own destruction, waiting for the precise moment to pull the foundation out from under them. Later that night, after the guests had left and the ego-stroking had ended, I sat alone in the study. I looked at our wedding photo on the desk. Grant looked so possessive, his hand claiming my waist. I opened my private leather notebook, the one Grant thought contained grocery lists and school schedules. I picked up my pen and wrote a single line, pressing the ink hard into the paper. "If they want me to disappear, I will disappear from their wallets first." Sloane Mercer did not just walk into our lives, she sliced into them like a scalpel. She was the new strategic consultant for Weller and Company, a woman who wore ambition like a second skin and viewed morality as nothing more than an optional accessory. She was beautiful, certainly, but it was a sharp, geometric kind of beauty that made you feel messy just by standing next to her. It started gradually. Grant began bringing Sloane back to the estate to work late. The library, which used to be the one room in the house where I could read in peace, became their war room. I would walk past the open doors and see them huddled over blueprints and spreadsheets, laughing a little too loudly for a business meeting at 9 o'clock at night. My mother-in-law, Cordelia, made no effort to hide her delight. During a Sunday brunch, she watched Sloane expertly dismantle a waiter for a minor error with a terrifyingly polite smile. "Finally," Cordelia said, sipping her mimosa and ignoring my presence entirely. "Someone who actually understands the Weller level. Sloane, you have the killer instinct my son needs. It is so refreshing to see a woman who knows that business is war." The insults began to migrate from private whispers to public declarations. At a charity gala the following week, I stood by Grant's side as he introduced Sloane to a major investor. When the conversation turned to the company's new fiscal direction, I opened my mouth to mention the sustainability metrics I had anonymously drafted for the board packet. Grant cut me off with a hand on my shoulder that felt heavy and suffocating. "Oh, Harper, sweetheart, do not bore yourself with this," he said, flashing a charming smile to the investor. "She is wonderful, truly, but she is much better suited for being a mother than understanding complex business models." "I try to spare her the headache," Sloane chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It is admirable. Really, I could never just stay home, but someone has to keep the hearth warm while we are out hunting." Right, I saw the trap clearly. Sloane was not just trying to replace me, she was rewriting the narrative. She was turning my silence into stupidity and my patience into passivity. She framed her condescension as kindness, treating me like a slow child who needed to be protected from the big, scary numbers. Grant started excluding me from the weekly summary meetings entirely. When I asked him about it in the hallway, he didn't even stop walking. "It is for your own good, Harper," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "You looked tired last week. I do not want to burden you with things you do not really grasp. Sloane can handle the minutes. Why don't you go get a massage or something?" He thought he was dismissing a servant. He did not know he was dismissing his architect. The only person who saw through the fog was Emma. My 8-year-old daughter was far too observant for her age. One afternoon, while I was helping her with a math problem that Noah was trying to color on, she stopped and looked at me. "Mom," she said, her brow furrowed, "you fixed the internet when the tech guy couldn't. You do all the tax papers for Grandma." "Why does Dad tell everyone you don't know anything? I heard him tell Ms. Sloane that you wouldn't know a profit margin from a grocery list." My heart clenched, but my face remained smooth. I would not poison her against her father. That was his job, and he was doing it well enough on his own. "Emma, look at me," I said, brushing a stray hair from her face. "People say a lot of things. Words are easy. They are cheap like air. You have to watch what people do. Always trust actions, not boasting. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, though I knew she was still hurt on my behalf. That night, after everyone was asleep, I saw Grant's iPad glowing on the nightstand. A notification popped up for a recurring appointment. I glanced at it and felt a cold, dark amusement curl in my stomach. The entry read, "Private Meeting Vault Liaison." Grant clearly thought this was some exclusive banking privilege, a sign that he had finally arrived at the peak of high finance. He had no idea that the vault liaison was not a person he could charm or bribe. He did not know that the liaison was a protocol I had established 10 years ago, triggered only when the primary accounts were flagged for high-risk behavior. He was scheduling a meeting with the executioner, and he thought it was a victory lap. The call came at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. My mother, Vivian Monroe, had collapsed. Her heart, always a little fragile, was finally rebelling against years of silent stress. By the time I arrived at St. Jude's Hospital, The situation had shifted from urgent to critical. The administrative liaison met me not with a treatment plan, but with a clipboard and a demand for a financial guarantee before they would prep the operating room for the specialized bypass she needed. I stepped into the hallway, my hands trembling just enough to make unlocking my phone difficult. I called Grant. I did not want to ask him for money, but at that moment, my own liquidity was tied up in term deposits that would take 24 hours to clear, and my mother did not have 24 hours. Grant answered on the third ring, the background noise of a busy restaurant filtering through. Grant, it is my mother, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She needs emergency surgery. The hospital requires a guarantee of $150,000 immediately. I need you to authorize the transfer. There was a pause, followed by the clinking of silverware. Harper, honey. Grant's voice was smooth, detached, the voice he used for underperforming department heads. That is a significant amount of capital to mobilize on zero notice. We are in the middle of the quarter. You have to think about the financial risk. Is the surgery guaranteed to work, or are we throwing good money after bad? I felt the air leave my lungs. She is my mother, Grant. Not a bad investment. Then I heard Cordelia's voice in the background, muffled but distinct. Grant, tell her that sometimes letting go is the ultimate wisdom. At her age, interventions can be so cruel. I hung up. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply walked back to the administrator, pulled out my phone, and accessed a dormant emergency fund I had established 5 years prior under my maiden name. I executed the wire transfer in 10 seconds. Do it, I told the administrator. I sat alone in the waiting room for 6 hours. No one from the Weller family came. No flowers arrived. My husband did not text to ask if she was alive. I watched the clock tick past midnight, realizing that to them, my mother was just another depreciating asset that was better off written off. When I finally was allowed into the recovery room, it was 3 a.m. Vivian looked small against the white sheets, tubes running from her arms like spider webs. But her eyes were open. They were clear, terrifyingly lucid. I took her hand. I am here, Mom. I am here. She squeezed my fingers with surprising strength. Her voice was a rasp, barely a whisper. They did not come, she stated. It wasn't a question. No, I admitted. Good, she whispered. Harper, listen to me. They will not stop at ignoring you. They will not stop at contempt. They will try to erase you. Rest. Mom, we can talk later. No. Now. She gestured weakly toward her personal effects bag on the chair, the blue velvet pouch, inside the lining. Get it. I found the bag. Inside a hidden seam, my fingers brushed against a small, hard object. I pulled out a velvet box, worn bald in patches. Inside lay a metal card. It was heavy, cold, and covered in fine scratches. There was no magnetic strip, no chip, only a strange geometric symbol etched into the center and a short string of numbers stamped along the bottom edge. What is this? I asked. It belonged to your grandfather. She breathed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. It belongs to a custodial organization that has changed its name a dozen times over the last century. Most people think it is a myth, but the people who matter, they know. I turned the card over. It felt dense, like solid platinum painted over to look like steel. Why are you giving me this? Because I see how they look at you, Vivian said, her breath catching. They think you are nothing. This card, whoever recognizes it, they know where the real power lies. It is not in the shouting. Harper, it is in the vault. I don't understand. How do I use it? Vivian gripped my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. Not yet. She wheezed. Do not use it yet. But when they push you, when you are backed against the wall and they have taken everything, you walk into the bank. You give this to the man with the keys. She closed her eyes, exhausted by the effort. Promise me. I promise, I whispered. I slipped the heavy metal card into my wallet, tucking it behind the school photos of Emma and Noah. It sat there against the innocent smiles of my children. A cold, hard secret. I didn't know what it did. I didn't know how much it was worth. But as I sat in the dark hospital room, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, I felt like I had just loaded a gun I hoped I would never have to fire. The Winter Solstice Gala was Cordelia's annual masterpiece, a night where the Ashford Ridge estate was draped in silver velvet and suffocating pretension. 200 guests filled the ballroom, sipping vintage champagne that I had privately secured from a distributor who refused to deal with Grant directly. I stood near the grand staircase, wearing the midnight blue gown Cordelia had selected for me. I felt less like the lady of the house and more like a rented fixture, a prop placed strategically to soften the sharp edges of the Weller ambition. Grant tapped a silver spoon against his crystal flute, the sharp sound silencing the room. He stood in the center of the floor, his arm draped possessively around Cordelia's shoulders, with Sloane standing just a step behind them like a dutiful lieutenant. "To my mother," Grant announced, his voice booming with unearned confidence. "The visionary." He raised his glass higher, then gestured loosely toward me. "And to Harper. Thank you, darling, for keeping the house standing. It is a great comfort to know that while I am out there building an empire and securing our legacy, you are here making sure the pillows are fluffed and dinner is on the table." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. I forced a smile, my jaw tight. Sloane stepped forward, swirling her wine, her eyes locking onto mine with predatory amusement. "Oh, Grant, be fair," she said, her voice projecting perfectly to the back of the room. "Not everyone is cut out for strategy and numbers." "It is a kindness, really. Some people are just domestic by design. We need people to handle the small things so the rest of us can handle the world." The laughter grew louder, more genuine this time. They were laughing at the little wife who didn't understand business. I looked up at the landing of the stairs. Emma and Noah were there, peeking through the banister. Emma was not smiling. She was squeezing Noah's hand, her grip so tight her knuckles were white. She stood rigid, her chin tucked in, absorbing the humiliation radiating from the room below. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter draft ran down my spine. I was not protecting them. By staying silent, I was teaching my daughter how to be a doormat. I was teaching my son that women were accessories. The party ended at 2 a.m. The house fell into a heavy, alcohol-soaked silence. I did not go to sleep. I went to the guest study and opened my secure laptop. For 7 years, I had been the invisible safety net beneath the high-wire act of the Weller family. I pulled up the dashboard. I looked at the vendor guarantees that were backed by my personal trust, the revolving credit lines I kept open with my own collateral, and the emergency liquidity funds that automatically topped up the company accounts whenever Grant overspent. To them, these were just fortunate banking glitches or the result of their own prestige. I did not delete the accounts. That would be messy. Instead, I simply removed the keystone. I navigated to the authorization settings, one by one. I unchecked the boxes marked automatic overdraft protection and guarantor liability. I revoked my digital signature from the supplier agreements. I severed the link between my private assets and their corporate bleeding. I did it without anger. It was surgical. I was simply stepping out of the way and letting gravity take its course. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. "Ethan," I said when the groggy voice answered. "Harper." "It is 3 o'clock in the morning." Ethan Rourke mumbled. "I know. I am sorry," I said, my voice flat and cold. "Activate the contingency plan, everything we discussed, the separation of assets, the freeze on the joint trusts, all of it." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, his voice sharpening with alertness. "Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. It is nuclear." "I am not going back," I replied. "I am moving forward." I hung up the phone. On the desk, sitting next to the glowing screen of the laptop, lay the worn metal card my mother had given me. I picked it up. It felt heavier than before. It was no longer just an escape hatch. I looked at the strange symbol etched into the surface, and for the first time, I didn't see a shield. I saw a weapon. The divorce papers did not arrive in the mail. They were delivered by a courier who looked like he had been hired specifically to intimidate me. I stood in the marble foyer and read the summary. It was not just a dissolution of marriage, it was a character assassination. The legal filing described me as a financial burden and a spouse who had made zero contribution to the marital assets over the last 10 years. Grant was requesting full custody of the property and primary custody of the children based on my lack of income. I barely had time to process the insults before the front door swung open. Grant marched in, flanked by 2 private security guards in black uniforms. He left the front door wide open so the neighbors across the street could see the spectacle. "You have 72 hours, Grant announced, his voice projecting toward the street. "I want you out. And do not even think about stepping foot in Weller and Company headquarters. Security has your photo. You are banned from the premises." He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to fall to my knees and beg. I looked at the guards, then back at him. My face was a mask of absolute calm. "I heard you, Grant," I said, my voice steady. "Please move out of the way. I need to pack the children's things." "Take only what you paid for." He sneered. "Which is nothing." I walked past him. I went straight to the children's rooms. I did not pack the jewelry he had given me, nor the designer clothes he insisted I wear for his image. I packed their favorite toys, their school uniforms, and the photo albums. I focused entirely on the logistics of extraction. Emma sat on her bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She looked up at me, her eyes red. "Mom," she asked, her voice trembling, Is this because of Ms. Sloane?" I stopped folding a shirt and knelt in front of her. I took her small hands in mine. "Oh, honey," I said softly. "This is happening because sometimes adults choose wrong. This is not your fault. It is never your fault." "Are we going to be poor?" Noah asked from the doorway, looking terrified. "We are going to be safe," I told him firmly. "And we are going to be together." We left the mansion 2 hours later. I drove my own car, the one bought in my name before the marriage, leaving the luxury SUV in the driveway. Grant stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching us leave like a victorious general. I drove us to a small apartment complex on the edge of town. I had rented the unit 3 days ago using my maiden name. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchenette, but the walls were freshly painted and it smelled like lemon cleaner instead of expensive perfume and lies. "This is ours." I told the kids as we walked in. "No one comes in here unless we invite them. No one yells here." That night, while the children slept in the bunk beds, I sat at the small laminate table. My phone buzzed incessantly. Grant was sending threats, warnings about defamation, and demands that I sign the papers immediately. I did not reply. Instead, I took screenshots of every text, every timestamp, every missed call. I created a digital folder named Evidence. I was turning my silence into a fortress. I opened social media and saw Grant's latest post. It was a black and white photo of him looking out a window at the city skyline. The caption read, "Leadership is about making the hard calls. Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to let the eagle fly. Resilience. Empire building." He was using the destruction of our family as a branding opportunity. He was getting likes and supportive comments from the very people who had eaten at my table a week ago. I closed the laptop and looked at my watch. It was midnight, the first of the month. Enjoy the flight. Grant. I whispered to the empty room. It is time you learned that money does not grow by itself. The automatic transfers usually hit the Weller accounts at 4 in the morning. For the first time in a decade, the pipeline was dry. The empire was about to wake up thirsty. It took exactly 30 days for the illusion of the Weller empire to dissolve. The first domino fell on a Friday. The day payroll was supposed to be processed for the 300 employees at the main plant. For the last 5 years, the operational shortfall had been quietly covered by an automatic sweep from a reserve fund I controlled. I had disabled that link. The money simply did not arrive. Grant did not look for the root cause. He looked for a throat to squeeze. I heard from a sympathetic assistant that Grant had fired the chief financial officer, a man who had served the company for 20 years. In a fit of rage, "Get out!" Grant had reportedly screamed, his voice shaking the glass walls of the conference room. "You are incompetent. You are trying to sabotage my vision." The chaos spread like an infection. Suppliers who had previously offered net 60 payment terms because of my personal guarantees suddenly demanded cash on delivery. The invisible hand that had smoothed over every rough edge of the business was gone, and the friction was starting to burn. Sloan Mercer, always the survivor, began to execute a tactical retreat. She stopped posting photos with Grant. In meetings, her language shifted from "we will conquer" to perhaps "you should consider." Grant, listen. Sloan said during a call that I had a transcript of, thanks to the loyalty of the staff I had treated well. I am just a consultant. I cannot fix a liquidity crisis that predates my arrival. Perhaps you should look at your own spending. She was preparing her lifeboat while he was still drilling holes in the hull. Even Cordelia was not spared. Her quarterly stay at the exclusive wellness clinic was canceled upon arrival. The clinic politely informed her that the direct billing authorization had been declined. She left me a voicemail, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock and fury. "Harper, there must be a mistake," she hissed into the phone. They told me to leave. Me, a Weller. You need to fix this glitch immediately. I deleted the message without listening to the end. Grant called me 2 nights later. He tried to adopt a tone of benevolent compromise. "Harper," he said, his voice tight. "Look, I have been thinking, for the sake of the children, maybe we should de-escalate. I am willing to allow you some access to the house. We just need to sit down and sort out these banking errors. I need the administrative passwords to the trust accounts. The children are doing well." "Grant," I replied, my voice cool and detached. "Emma has a soccer game on Saturday. You can pick them up at 10 o'clock in the morning. I do not care about the soccer game." He snapped, the mask slipping completely. "I am talking about the money. Why is everything frozen? What did you do to the accounts? I will have their bags packed for the weekend," I said. "Do not be late." I hung up. Grant, desperate and blinded by his own arrogance, made his fatal error the next morning. He filed an emergency legal motion accusing me of misappropriating company assets and intellectual property theft. He demanded a freeze on all accounts associated with my name, claiming they were actually corporate funds he had allowed me to manage. He thought he was trapping me. He thought cutting off my access would force me to surrender. He had no idea he had just walked into the kill zone. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Ethan Rourke. "Harper," Ethan said, his voice low and serious. "He did it. He filed the motion. He is claiming ownership of the custodial accounts to get a court order. Is it enough I asked?" "It is perfect," Ethan replied. "He just formally claimed assets he does not have the clearance to even view. He just blew his own leg off. Harper, it is time to go to the bank." The branch of the Ravenport Private Bank was a fortress of glass and mahogany located in the heart of downtown. This was the institution where Grant believed he was a king, where he had shaken hands with the regional director and boasted about his influence. I walked through the revolving doors wearing a simple trench coat, my posture straight, my face devoid of makeup. I was not there to charm anyone. I was escorted into the office of Mr. Vance, the senior relationship manager. He did not stand up when I entered. He sat behind his desk, tapping a gold pen against a leather folio, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Mrs. Weller, Vance said, his tone clipped. I will be brief. We received a legal notification this morning from your husband's counsel regarding potential fraudulent activity. All assets associated with your personal identification have been frozen pending an internal audit. I cannot release any funds to you. He looked at me expecting tears. He expected the desperate plea of a housewife cut off from her allowance. I am not here to argue about the freeze. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice low and even. I am here to clarify the hierarchy. I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a lawyer's letter or a plea bargain. I pulled out the worn velvet box. I opened it and slid the heavy, scratched metal card across the polished surface of his desk. It made a dull, heavy sound as it stopped right in front of his hands. Vance sighed, looking down with disdain. Mrs. Weller, I do not know what credit card this is, but we do not accept. His voice died in his throat. He saw the symbol etched into the center of the platinum. He saw the short string of numbers stamped on the bottom edge. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. He dropped his pen. He stood up so abruptly his chair slammed into the credenza behind him. I... Vance stammered, his eyes darting from the card to my face, terror written in every line of his expression. Please, one moment, please. He rushed to the heavy oak door and locked it. He ran back to his desk and picked up a black phone I had never seen used before, a direct line that bypassed the switchboard. He dialed a 3-digit code. This is Vance, Ravenport branch. I have a code Obsidian on the desk. Verify serial number 77-Alpha-09. Yes, the bearer is physically present. He listened for 10 seconds, his hand shaking. He hung up the phone and looked at me. The arrogance was gone. In its place was the trembling deference of a man who realized he had been standing on a trap door. Miss Monroe, Vance said, his voice barely a whisper. My deepest apologies. I was not informed of the primary custodial status. The system. It just showed the secondary operator. Secondary operator, I asked. Mr. Weller, Vance said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was listed as an authorized guest on the account structure, the capital, the reserves. They were never company funds. They are part of the Monroe Heritage Trust. You are the sole signatory. You have always been the sole signatory. The room went silent. The truth hit me harder than the cold air outside. Grant had been building his ego on money that had been quietly shielding him for years, money that belonged to a legacy he knew nothing about. What does this card do? I asked, pointing to the metal rectangle. Vance swallowed hard. This card. It is a recall protocol. It only appears when the heir decides to terminate the lease. It means you are calling the loans home. Good, I said. Verify my ownership. Revoke all guest privileges. If Grant Weller attempts to access these funds again, what happens? Vance typed furiously on his keyboard. If he attempts access after I execute this command, the system will not just reject him. It will flag the attempt as a federal crime. It will be recorded as attempted wire fraud against a sovereign trust. Do it, I said. 5 minutes later. Vance handed me a confirmation slip. The freeze was gone. My access was absolute. And somewhere in the Weller and Company headquarters, a computer screen was about to turn red. It is done. Ms. Monroe, Vance said, handing the card back to me with 2 hands, like it was a holy relic. I took the card and placed it back in my wallet. I checked my phone. A notification from the bank app appeared, unauthorized access attempt blocked. IDG, Weller, status reported. I walked out of the bank into the winter sunlight. For the first time in months, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of the person holding the keys to the cage. Grant was not just drowning. He was trying to sell the lifeboat while he was still inside it. With the flow of my family's money cut off, he and Sloan had concocted a desperate, scorched earth plan. Ethan and I found it buried deep in the server logs we now had legal access to via the bank's audit team. They were preparing to sell the patent for the company's flagship filtration system to our direct competitor. It was a fire sale designed to inject quick cash into the accounts and, I suspected, line a private offshore account for the two of them before the ship went down. "Look at this," Ethan said, pointing to a PDF on the screen. "The transfer of ownership document. It is dated yesterday." I leaned in. The signature at the bottom was mine. Or rather, it was a pixelated, clumsy copy of my signature lifted from an old tax return. "He forged it," I said, feeling a cold calm settle over me. "He actually forged my signature on a federal transfer document. And he did a terrible job," Ethan replied, tapping the screen. "The digital timestamp proves this file was created on Grant's personal laptop at 3 o'clock in the morning. He is not just a thief. Harper, he is sloppy." While Grant was busy committing felonies, Cordelia was fighting the war on a different front. She went to the local press. By noon, the Ashford Gazette ran a front-page story with the headline, "Vindictive Ex-Wife Destroys Local Legacy Out of Spite." In the interview, Cordelia described me as a greedy, uneducated woman who was weaponizing divorce to hurt hundreds of innocent employees. My phone exploded with messages from neighbors and parents at the school. I did not reply to a single one. I did not go on social media to defend myself. I simply opened my laptop and drafted a single email to the board of directors of Weller and Company. "To the board, I will be attending the emergency meeting next week. Do not sign anything before then. If you do, you will be complicit in fraud." 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, a board member who had served since my father-in-law's time. "Harper." His voice was gruff but respectful. "I got your note. There have always been rumors. Rumors about an activation clause. A fail-safe. Is that what this is? I will explain everything on Monday." "Mr. Henderson," I said, "just make sure Grant does not sell the patent." "I will stall him," he promised. Sloan Mercer, with her shark-like instinct for blood in the water, sensed the shift. She realized Grant was a sinking vessel, and she decided to swim. She texted me asking for a meeting, claiming she wanted to mediate peace for the sake of the company. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Sloan arrived 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and looking more frazzled than I had ever seen her. She ordered a black coffee and didn't touch it. "Look, Harper," she started, leaning in conspiratorially. "Grant he is losing it. I tried to tell him that selling the patent was risky. I am just a consultant. I cannot control him. I thought you should know. He is dangerous right now." She was trying to flip. She wanted to position herself as a witness rather than an accomplice. I sat back, sipping my tea, letting the silence stretch until she felt the need to fill it. "He is paranoid," she continued, her voice lowering. "He keeps the draft of the sale contract in the office safe, the one behind the painting. He thinks I do not know the combination, but I do. He is going to sign it Monday morning before the meeting. Is that so?" I asked softly. "I just want to help," Sloan said, her eyes pleading for immunity. "I did not sign up for fraud. I thought he was a legitimate businessman. Thank you, Sloan," I said, standing up. "You have been very helpful." I walked out of the cafe with the final piece of the puzzle. I had the metal card, which served as the key. I had the digital trail of the forgery, which served as the evidence. And now, thanks to Sloane's desperate attempt to save her own skin, I knew exactly where the smoking gun was hidden and when the crime was set to be finalized. I checked the calendar on my phone. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on Monday morning. I looked at the 3 items listed in my notes: the card, the forgery, the schedule. It was no longer a rescue mission. It was a trap, and they had all walked right into it. Grant received the summons for the emergency board meeting on Sunday evening. True to his nature, he misinterpreted the entire situation. He believed the board was gathering to offer him a bailout package, a vote of confidence to quell the market panic. He was so confident in his narrative of persecution that he invited a local news crew to stand in the lobby of the Weller and Company headquarters. He wanted an audience for his resurrection. He brought Cordelia with him, of course, to add the necessary gravitas of the family matriarch standing by her besieged son. I knew exactly what his opening statement would be because I knew how his mind worked. He would blame the global market volatility. He would blame the incompetence of the CFO he had just fired, and most importantly, he would blame me. He had prepared a speech about how his vindictive ex-wife had used her intimate knowledge of the family finances to sabotage the company out of spite. I did not dress for a funeral. I dressed for a coronation. I chose a charcoal suit with sharp architectural lines, a silk blouse, and stilettos that clicked against the floor with the rhythm of a ticking clock. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. When I looked in the mirror, the soft, accommodating wife who arranged flowers was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the ink on the checks. Ethan met me at the curb outside the apartment complex. He held a thick, sealed envelope in his hand. "The bank sent the courier an hour ago," Ethan said. "The confirmation of the custodial structure is certified. We also have the metadata from the server proving the forgery. It is all here," before I left. Emma walked out of her room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She looked at my suit, then at my face. "Mom," she asked quietly, "where are you going?" I knelt down, careful not to crease my trousers, and kissed her forehead. "I am going to work." "Honey," I said, "I am going to take back the truth." As I drove toward the headquarters, my phone rang over the car speakers. It was my mother. Her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks, the rasp of the hospital ventilator almost gone. "Harper," she said. "I am on my way." "Mom," I replied, gripping the steering wheel. "Listen to me," she said, her tone serious. "Do not do this for revenge. Revenge is... it is a fire that burns the person holding the torch. Do this to finish it. Do it! To break the loop for your children. I promise," I said. "This is for Emma and Noah." When I arrived at the glass towers of Weller and Company, the lobby was buzzing with the press Grant had invited. I walked past them, head high, ignoring the sudden flurry of camera flashes. I reached the security turnstiles. The head of security, a man named Mike who had known me for 10 years, stepped in front of me. He looked pained. "Mrs. Weller," Mike said, looking down at his boots. "I am sorry. Mr. Weller issued a strict ban. I cannot let you up. Please do not make me call the police." I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply waited. 2 seconds later, the landline at the security desk rang with a sharp, insistent trill. Mike picked it up. "Security," he said. He listened for a moment, his eyes widening as he looked at me. "Yes, sir." "Understood, Mr. Henderson. Immediately." He hung up the phone and stepped aside, swiping his MasterCard to open the gate. "Go ahead, ma'am," Mike said, his voice respectful. "They are waiting in the main boardroom." I took the elevator to the top floor in silence. The doors slid open. I walked down the long corridor lined with portraits of Weller ancestors, men who had built a legacy that Grant was currently trying to pawn. I reached the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. I could hear Grant's voice from inside, loud and theatrical. "And so, we must cut out the cancer that is dragging this firm down," he was shouting. "We must stand firm against this domestic sabotage." I pushed the doors open. They swung inward with a heavy thud. The room went silent. Grant stopped mid-sentence, his hand raised in a fist of mock-righteous indignation. He turned around slowly. He looked at me, standing at the head of the long table, framed by the city skyline. For the first time in our marriage, He did not look at me and see a prop or a servant. He looked at me and realized he was looking at a stranger who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Mr. Henderson did not offer Grant a seat. He remained standing at the head of the table, his face grim. "Grant," Henderson said, his voice cutting through the room like a gavel. "Effective immediately. Your executive powers are suspended pending a forensic audit. We have received evidence of unauthorized contract signings and severe risk management violations." Grant turned purple. He slammed his hand on the mahogany table. "This is absurd," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is behind this." She locked the accounts out of spite because I left her. I walked forward calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the scratched metal card. I placed it gently on the center of the table. The sound of metal on wood was soft, but it silenced the room. "The bank has verified the structure this morning." "Grant," I said, my voice steady. "The accounts you have been draining to prop up your ego are not company funds. They are part of the Monroe Heritage Trust. I am the sole signatory. I have always been the sole signatory." Grant stared at the card, his eyes bulging. You let me believe those were operational profits." "You tricked me." I did not lie. I replied, looking him dead in the eye. I was silent. "You imagined the rest." Ethan stepped forward and opened the sealed file. He projected a document onto the screen behind us. It was the transfer of intellectual property, the sale of the filtration patent Grant had tried to rush through. "This is a digital forgery of Harper's signature," Ethan announced. "Timestamps show it was created on your private laptop at 3 in the morning, and we have the emails." Grant opened his mouth to deny it, but the side door opened. Sloane Mercer walked in. She did not look at Grant. She looked at the floor. Sloane Grant whispered, "Tell them." Sloane took a deep breath and looked at the board members. Grant forged the signature. I advised against it. And Mrs. Weller was the one who pushed for the immediate divorce. She told Grant to kick Harper out to seize full control of the assets before the fiscal quarter ended. Cordelia, who had been sitting in the corner clutching her pearls, gasped. Grant looked like he had been punched in the gut. I did not smile. This was not a game. "Grant Weller," I said, my voice projecting clearly, "I am revoking your access to all capital. Your employment is terminated for breach of fiduciary duty and attempted fraud. The authorities are waiting in the lobby to discuss the forgery charges." "You cannot do this," Cordelia shrieked, standing up. "Think of the family name. Think of the Weller honor." I turned to her slowly. "You left my mother to die in a hospital corridor because you thought it would save you money," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that terrified her more than a scream. "You wanted me weak. You wanted me broken. Today, you are simply receiving the lesson you taught me." I turned back to the board. "We are not selling the patent," I announced. "We are going to keep the staff. We are going to pay salaries on time. But the private jets, the galas, and the vanity projects are over. An empire does not need applause. It needs discipline." Grant slumped into a chair, defeated. He looked up at me, and for the first time, he did not see a wife. He saw a titan. "What about the kids?" he asked, his voice breaking. "They will be safe," I said. "Visitation will be supervised until the investigation is complete. Their mental safety is my only priority now." I turned and walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back at the ruin I left behind. I walked out to the parking lot where my car was waiting. I took the metal card out of my pocket and put it back in the velvet box. I would return it to my mother tonight. It was no longer a weapon. It was just a piece of metal again. I drove to the school to pick up Emma and Noah. When they saw me, they ran to the gate. "Did you finish work, Mom?" Emma asked. "Yes, baby." I smiled, hugging them both. "I finished everything. Let's go home. A real home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Harper's Revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.